So I'm going to start off just showing this general slide that's similar to one you saw in Beth's last talk. Actually, I think this came from Adel, as a matter of fact, because he was very big about categorizing things. So in terms of potential shelf life, you see pineapple slices tend to have a longer potential shelf life. Things like banana, citrus, papaya have shorter potential shelf life. Starting with banana, stage 5 is probably about the best stage to process fresh cut banana if you're going to do that. So that to me is very similar to the work we did with mango, trying to figure out what's the best combination between ripe enough to be good flavor, but not so ripe that you don't have enough shelf life to market the product. So this is 4 days at 5 degrees, 7 days at 5 degrees. And you can see, so the banana slices are potentially okay. This is showing some chemical dips. These are the same type of antioxidants that you've seen some examples of before. Calcium chloride is up there. Actually, there was a question previously about the taste on the mangoes. Calcium chloride is one that some people dislike the taste. It can be bitter if the concentration is too high. Chemical dips can delay softening and darkening. So that's 1 day and 2 days at 5 degrees. Combined effects of chemical dip, edible coating, and modified atmosphere on post-cutting life of fresh cut bananas. So this is a couple of research reports showing that the calcium salt and ascorbic acid and cysteine, carrageenan as an edible coating. Edible coatings like carrageenan actually have some potential for a lot of fresh cut fruit because they tend to have a hygroscopic property, meaning that they absorb water spontaneously from the air, which means that they keep the surface of the cut fruit looking moist. That's something that we've played around with mango with some success. Here's preparation of fresh cut pineapples, largely done manually, but there's machines that can do this also. We often take student groups to a Del Monte fresh cut processing plant that's relatively near Gainesville, and it's funny, from year to year they'll be trying out some machine for melons or pineapples or whatever, and then the next time we go they're back to people doing it by hand again, then later on they're trying another machine, and they always seem to go back to people. I don't want to offend any equipment manufacturers, but that's what I've observed. So this is showing intercultivar differences in pineapple, just making the point that selection of cultivar is important. You have to start with something that has good flavor potential and good shelf life potential. Did anyone notice with the melons this morning how firm they were? When I tried to cut those with a fork, I almost couldn't get through, and I thought, oh man, these are going to be unripe. But they were actually very sweet. They were good. So I think they've selected a very firm melon varieties, whoever the caterer is getting those from. So there's two different pineapple varieties. I think the color is just the difference that's being pointed out. This is the translucency that I showed earlier in the water-soaking translucency talk. And Marita Cantwell showed one of these, or a few of these, for peaches and some other things. Are you aware that there's a publication available from UC Davis that's just a compilation of all of these type of rating scales? It's available either as a hard copy or a CD. Oh, Zolfina has the CD. It's a very nice resource. It's just collected from not only their work here in Davis, but from other places. As you can see, they used a peach one that I contributed. Temperature is the most important factor in maintaining quality of fresh cut pineapples. So that's a comparison between 0 and 5 degrees. This is one that I showed before also. So these were both stored for 12 days at 5 degrees in air, no map, and from fruit that were 2 days from harvest versus 14-day-old fruit. And you can see that the older fruit senesced faster as fresh cut chunks. So that's a consideration. Here's controlled atmospheres as a supplement to low temperature for fresh cut pineapple. You have air in the middle, 2% oxygen on the left, 2% oxygen plus 10% CO2. Honestly, I don't see any difference there in appearance. But 2% oxygen, 10% CO2 was the recommended optimum atmosphere. Now papaya. Papaya wasn't actually included before. I haven't found a lot of information on research on fresh cut papaya. I found a few research reports. This one is extended shelf life and quality of fresh cut papaya derived from ripe fruit treated with the ethylene antagonist 1-methylcyclopropene. So you've heard 1-MCP a couple of times now, and there's interest in that with regard to fresh cut fruit because of this idea that the fruit need to be ripe when the consumer opens the package because they expect it to be ready to eat. And because the 1-MCP blocks the ethylene binding site and therefore makes the tissue insensitive to ethylene, it stops further ripening. So you should be able to cut something and arrest the ripening at that stage for quite a long time. The effects of 1-MCP eventually are overcome because the cells actually synthesize new binding sites, and so eventually they recover the ability to respond to ethylene. But for a significant amount of time, at least within the shelf life requirements for fresh cut, it should be useful. So physicochemical and sensory quality of fresh cut papaya in micro-perforated polyvinyl chloride containers. So this is a micro-perf package, a map package, and these two figures are showing papayas cut at the more green than yellow stage and the more yellow than green stage. And they actually reported that storing papaya cubes cut at this more yellow than green stage had a shelf life of 19 days at 4 degrees C. And I sort of look askance at that. You see this in a lot of research reports, and it's sort of like, okay, how do they define shelf life? And in some cases, they define the shelf life as how many days until the product becomes essentially inedible. Well, that's not really how we define shelf life. Shelf life is how many days that it remains acceptable quality for consumers, which is long before it becomes inedible. So I think the 19 days is much longer than reality, but they did recommend that the more yellow than green is better than more green than yellow. So that doesn't seem like a big surprise. This is a very interesting one because it has sort of a weird result. They looked at the effect of how you cut the papaya on the shelf life. And so they looked at a number of different shapes, spears and cubes, and they found that spheres, which would be like what you would take out with a melon baller, spheres showed the lowest loss of texture and weight, while cubes presented the highest losses. Why would that be? I'm trying to think in terms of what's the relative wounded area to the mass of the tissue, maybe something like that. So I don't doubt their results, but it's just sort of a head scratcher why that would be. So I put that in there. If anyone's working with papaya, you can play around with that and see if your experience is the same as theirs. And then this is Paul and Chen, Rob Paul and his wife, I forget her first name, reported quite a while ago the same thing as we saw with the previous one, 55 to 80% skin yellowing, meaning more yellow than green, is the best stage to cut the papayas. And actually they're talking about cutting them at 5 kilogram per square centimeter flesh firmness. That seemed, I'm not sure how that relates to pounds firmness with an 8 millimeter probe, but it seems pretty soft. And I think that goes along with what we saw before, that the papaya firmness doesn't change a whole lot during storage. So you can start with a fairly ripe fruit and have pretty good shelf life. Okay. So here we go, move on to citrus fruit. There has been a fair amount of research done with citrus fruit in Spain, actually. Some very good post-harvest labs there, and that's mainly what we're going to be reporting on. This is fresh-cut pomelo. I think this was actually a picture taken in Bangkok, Thailand, where pomelo is very popular. We don't see pomelo much here. Fresh-cut fruits in Spain. So this was looking similar to the papaya one, what effect you have from different styles of cutting. And this was very clearly, they were looking at the effect of how much cutting you do and what effect that has on the shelf life. So intact wedges, segments, have a longer shelf life than any kind of cut slice or orientation of slicing. So here's fresh cut lemons. Main disorders: dehydration, segment separation, albedo, the white tissue turning brown, membrane browning within the segments. More extreme examples of the same thing mainly. Dehydration, segment separation, browning, and then decay related or microbial growth related problems. And here we have the results comparing wedges to slices of different sizes, full slice, half slice, quarter slice, and they were evaluated for quality, with 1 being the worst quality and 5 being the best quality. And you can see here some of the lower scores come from higher temperatures and also more extreme cutting of the tissue, which sort of is what you would expect. There's 10 days at 5 degrees, cut the different ways. Wedges, slices, half, quarter slices. Fresh cut lime. I'll note here something I don't have a slide about, but Michelle Daniluk at University of Florida, another UC Davis alumna actually, she's done some work about the survival of food poisoning related microorganisms on lime and lemon wedges, the type that you get in restaurants to put in your drink, and that can become contaminated if people are cutting them in the back room of the bar by hand. And actually, surprisingly, these organisms can survive. You would think with such a low pH that it wouldn't be very conducive, but they can survive for several days, as a matter of fact. So I'll just throw that out there so you're aware that you can't ignore sanitation and food safety, even with citrus fruit. Okay, so here's processing of the limes. I didn't mention with the mangoes, I'm going back to mangoes because that's what I work with so much. The way that we've done this in our research is to sanitize the whole fruit before peeling and cutting, and then we actually dip the peeled fruit back into chlorine again before doing the second round of cutting. And we've had to do that because in our lab facility, it's not necessarily a clean facility. We try and set aside one of our storage rooms and sanitize it before we do an experiment. But we sometimes have some problems with contamination. So Here's the limes. That's what they look like after day 8, so they really don't have a lot of problems. Survivors, oh, I did have something in here from Michelle. Okay, so MD Daniluk, that's Michelle Daniluk. Survival of salmonella on lime slices. So they demonstrated that there is a significant survival. So here's just some general pictures of fresh cut fruit processing. I won't name any names where this is, but this is very similar to what I've seen in a lot of places. So the lower left is a chlorinated water bath, sometimes chilled water, not always, and then some sorting, hand cutting. These are actually mangoes being cut, and there's pineapples there also being cut, melons, and putting them in the packages. So how many of you are processing fruit in general? All of you? That's why you're in the fruit thing? Are you doing it by hand? How many people are using machines to do peeling or cutting? Yeah? And it's working, right? We're searching right now for a machine that can cut the riper mangoes that we're trying to recommend people cut. So I'm going to finish up here way ahead of time. We're fine. Yeah? Oh, okay. So prepare the products at refrigerated temperature, minimize wounding in preparation, use good sanitation practices. I mean, this is like kindergarten for you guys. None of this is new for you. All hydro handling steps require cold sanitized water. Now, like I said, that is something where I've seen in some operations. They're not really using very cold water when they sanitize the fruit. Use appropriate chemical treatments to control microbes, browning, texture changes. Package in MAP. Handle the final product at 0 to 5 degrees. And the shelf life, 7 to 14 days. And that's all I got, except a pretty picture of a fruit bouquet. Any questions?